She had always loved music. Even as a little girl, she would sit for hours at the old upright piano in her small living room, her fingers stumbling at first, then growing confident with every passing day. The notes, though imperfect, carried her imagination to places far beyond her small neighborhood. Music was not just a hobby. It was her escape from the weight of reality, a language that spoke for her when words failed. But life had a way of pushing dreams aside. Her love for music had to take a back seat. Her mornings began early, often before the sun had fully risen. She would get dressed in the plain uniform of a waitress, a simple blouse and skirt, worn soft from constant washing. Her hair tied back neatly, she carried herself with quiet determination. The restaurant where she worked was busy, always filled with the clatter of plates, the murmur of conversations, and the occasional laughter or complaint from customers. It wasn't glamorous work, but it put food on the table and kept her family afloat. Every tip, every extra hour she could squeeze in mattered. People at the restaurant knew her as polite and hard-working, though they didn't know the depth of her past. Few could imagine that the young woman who took orders and wiped tables with a tired smile had once dreamed of concert halls and music schools. She had been talented enough to attend a prestigious music program, but the tuition was high, and her family could not afford it. One by one, her options dwindled until she was left with jobs that barely paid. Each day a struggle to survive. Despite the demands of her job, she never completely abandoned music. Late at night, after her family had gone to bed, she would sit at the small keyboard she had saved for years and play. Sometimes she would lose herself in classical pieces, letting the melodies flow as if she were in a grand concert hall. Other times she improvised, creating songs that reflected her mood, joy, frustration, hope, or sorrow. These private sessions were her sanctuary, a reminder that the dream was still alive. Even if the world around her seemed determined to ignore it, one morning, she received a call for a special event. It was a high-profile gathering at a wealthy family's mansion. She didn't know all the details, only that they needed extra waitstaff for the evening. She hesitated. She had been to parties before, but this one promised an atmosphere far beyond her usual experience. She accepted anyway, hoping that the extra money would help with rent and her mother's medical bills. There was a quiet thrill in her chest as she prepared for the night. Part of her wondered if she would see people who valued music, even in a setting so different from the concert halls she had imagined. The mansion was breathtaking. Tall columns framed the entrance, and a wide driveway led to the front doors, flanked by ornate gardens glowing under carefully placed lights. As she stepped out of the taxi, she felt a mix of awe and intimidation. The staff directed her to the kitchen area, a bustling space where chefs shouted over the hiss of pans and the clinking of utensils. She quickly slipped into her role, taking orders, carrying trays, and weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. The guests arrived, dressed in their finest. Men wore tailored suits, and women shimmered in dresses that caught the light with every movement. She moved among them, pouring drinks, offering small smiles, and nodding politely. The contrast between her world and theirs was stark. They spoke of investments, vacations abroad, and art pieces they collected, while she silently counted the minutes until her shift ended. Yet she reminded herself that this was just another job. Another day where she had to work, endure, and get through. Despite her resolve to remain unnoticed, she could not help noticing the grand piano in the corner of the main hall. Its polished surface reflected the chandelier lights, and its keys seemed to call to her. A whisper from the past that stirred memories of hours spent practicing, of songs learned and performed, of dreams she had once held tightly in her heart. She felt a pang of longing but quickly shoved it aside, focusing instead on the guests and the tasks at hand. As the evening progressed, she encountered small moments of tension. Some guests were impatient, others dismissive, their attention drawn more to each other than to the staff. A few sneered at the simplicity of her uniform, making small, cutting remarks under their breath. She held her head high, maintaining professionalism, but inside, she felt a familiar sting. A reminder of the many times she had been underestimated or overlooked. The night was long, and by the time the main course was served, fatigue had settled into her bones. She moved like a shadow, efficient and quiet, carrying dishes and refilling glasses without complaint. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity, chefs barking instructions and servers hustling to meet demands. She paused for a moment near the piano, glancing at it again. Her fingers itched to play, to bring music into the room, but she knew it was not her place. Here, she was a servant, and the piano was a decoration, not an instrument waiting for her hands. Then came the moment that would change everything. The hired pianist, who was supposed to provide background music, had been delayed, and the host's voice carried across the room, announcing that someone should entertain the guests. A few chuckles followed, and then, as if on cue, a wealthy guest, laughing and looking around, suggested that the young waitress try her hand at the piano. The remark was sarcastic, meant as a joke, but it was directed at her. All eyes turned toward her. Her heart leaped into her throat. Fear, embarrassment, and disbelief collided within her. She wanted to protest, to say that she couldn't, that she was not part of the entertainment, but the laughter of the guests and the subtle pressure in their eyes held her frozen. Slowly, hesitantly, she approached the piano. Each step felt surreal, as if she were moving in a dream where the floor shifted beneath her feet. She looked at the keys, the familiar black and white pattern welcoming her like an old friend. And for a moment, she remembered the countless nights she had spent practicing alone, the hours of solitude where music had been her companion and her solace. The guests watched expectantly, some still smirking, others curious. She sat down, her hands hovering over the keys, trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath, and then pressed the first note. The sound rang out clear and soft, catching the attention of everyone in the room. She began to play slowly, unsure at first, letting the melody find its way through her fingers. The notes were tentative but beautiful, echoing in the grand hall. As she continued, something shifted. Her fingers moved with more confidence, her body relaxed, and the music flowed more naturally. It was as though all the years of hidden practice, all the moments of longing and hope, had been waiting for this chance. The room seemed to hold its breath, the laughter fading, replaced by awe. Guests leaned forward, their conversations silenced, their eyes on her as the young waitress transformed before them. In that moment, she was not just a server. She was a musician, a storyteller, a person whose talent could not be ignored. Each note carried her story of struggle, perseverance, and unwavering passion. The rich, intimidating environment that had felt so alien only moments before now became a stage for her truth. The piano, once a symbol of what she had lost, became a bridge to what she could still achieve. The music wrapped around the room, connecting everyone present. The host and the guests who had moments ago been poised and aloof now sat in silence, captivated. Even the staff paused, watching in wonder as the waitress poured herself into her performance. It was not perfect in the technical sense, but it was filled with emotion, authenticity, and soul. Each chord, each arpeggio, told a story of resilience and hidden strength. She lost track of time. The clinking of glasses, the chatter of the party, and the hum of conversation faded into the background. There was only the music, only the connection between her heart and the piano. A silent dialogue that spoke louder than words ever could. She realized that this moment, unplanned and unexpected, was a turning point. It was a chance to reclaim a piece of herself that she had nearly given up on. To show the world that her worth was not defined by her job or her circumstances, but by her passion and talent. When the last note lingered and faded, a profound silence filled the hall. Then came the applause, hesitant at first, then growing in volume and sincerity. The guests who had mocked her earlier now looked at her with respect and admiration. Some wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the depth of feeling she had conveyed. The host approached, offering words of astonishment and praise, unable to hide the surprise at the talent that had emerged from the most unlikely source. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. The fear that had gripped her moments ago was replaced by a warmth that spread through her chest. She had faced humiliation and uncertainty, and in doing so, she had rediscovered herself. Music had carried her through the night, transforming what could have been a moment of shame into an unforgettable triumph. As she stepped away from the piano, she knew that her life was about to change. The experience had awakened something within her, a renewed determination to pursue her passion despite the obstacles. She returned to her duties, but now with a sense of quiet confidence, aware that the world had glimpsed the depth of her talent. For the first time in a long while, she felt that anything was possible, and that her journey, though challenging, was leading her toward something remarkable. The night continued, but the magic of that moment lingered. She carried the applause and the astonished gazes with her, a reminder that hidden potential often waits for the right moment to shine. And as she left the mansion, tired but elated, she could not help but smile, thinking of the music that had once again become her guide, her voice, and her future. The next day, she woke with a mix of excitement and nervousness still lingering in her chest. The previous night had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. The applause, the awe in the eyes of the guests, the feeling of the piano keys under her fingers, it was all vivid in her mind. But with the memory also came the anxiety. She wondered if it had been a fluke, a brief moment where luck had aligned with talent, or if it had truly opened a door she'd never expected to see. She went about her day with the usual routine, yet everything seemed different. Even the small cafe where she usually grabbed her morning coffee felt new somehow. She noticed the way sunlight spilled across the tables. The chatter of regulars, the smell of freshly baked bread, all seemed more alive, more present. Music played softly in her mind as she moved through her day, and she realized she could not shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. Work at the restaurant was no less demanding. Orders came thick and fast, customers complained about minor mistakes, and the kitchen never stopped shouting instructions. Yet, she moved through it with a newfound confidence. The memory of the piano and the music she had played gave her a quiet strength, a sense that she had a hidden power within her. She smiled more freely, held her head higher, and for the first time in a long time, felt proud of herself. Later that evening, she was called to another event at a similarly wealthy mansion. It was meant to be just another shift, just another evening of serving drinks and food, but she felt a flutter of anticipation. Perhaps someone from the party the night before would be there, or maybe another chance would arise. The thought made her both anxious and eager. When she arrived at the mansion, she was once again struck by its grandeur. Tall pillars, sprawling gardens, and marble floors created a world that seemed so far removed from her own. Inside, the main hall gleamed with crystal chandeliers, polished wood, and art that she could only admire from afar. She slipped into her uniform and began her duties. Moving with practiced efficiency among the guests, the atmosphere was different from the previous night. The guests were lively, some chatting animatedly, others laughing heartily. She carried trays filled with drinks, offering polite smiles and soft greetings. A few recognized her from the party the night before. Their eyes held a mix of surprise and curiosity, and some whispered to each other, clearly impressed by what they had seen. She felt a strange mixture of pride and discomfort. She was glad for the acknowledgement, but she did not want to be treated differently just because of a single performance. As the night progressed, she began to notice subtle gestures from the guests. Some would glance at the piano, then look at her with expectant eyes. Others would nudge each other, whispering quietly. The excitement in the air was palpable, and she realized that the story of her performance had traveled. Word of the waitress who had played the piano beautifully was spreading faster than she had imagined. Then it happened. A group of younger guests, curious and playful, approached her. They asked if she would play something for them. Their tone was light, teasing, as if they expected her to refuse. She hesitated, feeling the familiar nerves rising, but something inside her shifted. She had learned the night before that she could face fear and turn it into something beautiful. She nodded quietly and followed them toward the piano as she sat down. Her fingers hovering over the keys, she felt the weight of their attention. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, breathing deeply, and then began to play. The notes flowed gently at first, soft and tentative, then stronger and more assured. She lost herself in the music, just as she had the night before, letting every emotion guide her hands. The room fell silent, guests drawn into the melody as if it were speaking directly to their hearts. She played for what felt like hours, though in reality it was only a few minutes. The music wrapped around the room, touching each listener in a unique way. Some smiled, others closed their eyes, letting the sound fill them. The younger guests who had asked her to play were captivated, their teasing replaced by genuine admiration. Even the older, more distinguished guests who initially appeared indifferent were moved, their expressions softening as they listened. After she finished, the applause was immediate and sincere. People came forward, praising her skill, asking where she had learned to play, and expressing disbelief that someone who worked as a waitress could possess such talent. She smiled politely, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. She had known her own abilities, but seeing others recognize them so openly was overwhelming. A few moments later, a man in his late 40s, sharply dressed and exuding a quiet authority, approached her. He introduced himself as a musician and talent scout who often worked with performers at high-profile events. He explained that he had been impressed by her technique, her emotional depth, and the authenticity of her playing. He asked if she had considered pursuing music professionally, and she found herself explaining her situation briefly, how life had forced her to set aside her dreams. The man listened intently, nodding with understanding. He offered to help her, to connect her with opportunities where her talent could be seen and appreciated. She felt a surge of hope and disbelief. Could it be true? Could this really be the beginning of a new chapter in her life? Even as excitement built within her, there was also fear. She had been hurt and underestimated so many times before. Could she trust that this opportunity would be real and not just another moment of fleeting attention? She realized that taking this step would require courage, the same courage she had needed to sit at the piano the night before. But she also knew that fear had never stopped her from creating music. And perhaps it would not stop her now. Over the next few weeks, her life became a whirlwind of new experiences. The man who had approached her arranged for private performances, introductions to music teachers, and even small concerts at local venues. Each event was a chance to grow, to refine her skills, and to show the world what she could do. She poured herself into each opportunity, practicing tirelessly, learning not only music, but also how to handle the pressures and expectations of performing in front of audiences who had no idea who she was. Her family noticed the change in her almost immediately. Her mother, who had worried constantly about money and stability, was filled with pride and relief. Her father, usually quiet and reserved, could not stop talking about her performances, sharing stories with neighbors and friends. For the first time in years, they all felt a sense of hope that life could be more than just survival. At the restaurant, her colleagues watched with curiosity. Some were impressed, others skeptical. The owner, who had once seen her only as a hard-working waitress, now treated her with a different kind of respect. She continued to work there, balancing the demands of her job with the new opportunities in music. It was not easy, but she found joy in every note she played and in the recognition of her talent. One evening, as she prepared for another performance, she reflected on how far she had come. The young woman who had once been nervous and uncertain had grown into someone who could face challenges, transform fear into art, and inspire others through music. The mansion parties, the applause, and the recognition were all part of a larger journey, one that was just beginning. She realized that her talent had always been there, waiting for the right moment. Life had tested her, tried to suppress her dreams, but she had persevered. Each note she played was a testament to her resilience, a message that no matter how difficult circumstances might be, passion and dedication could lead to transformation. And so, with each performance, she continued to grow. She learned to trust herself, to embrace opportunities, and to let her music speak for her. The rich parties, the elegant halls, and the impressed guests were no longer intimidating. They had become the stage on which she could shine, a place where her hidden talent could finally be seen and appreciated by the world. She had become more confident with each passing performance. Yet the thrill of sitting at the piano in front of an audience never faded. Each time she pressed her fingers onto the keys, she felt the same mix of nerves and excitement that had accompanied her the very first night at the mansion. Music was no longer just her escape. It was becoming her voice, her way of connecting with people and telling a story only she could tell. That evening, she arrived at another grand event. The mansion was familiar now, though it still inspired awe. She moved through the corridors with a quiet grace, balancing trays of drinks while keeping an eye on the piano, as if it were calling to her. Guests laughed and mingled, some noticing her presence with polite nods, others curious about the young woman who had already made a name for herself in such a short time. The whispers of the previous night seemed to follow her, a reminder that her talent had begun to ripple outward, attracting attention from people she had never imagined would notice her. The piano was set up in the corner of the main hall. Gleaming under the soft chandelier lights, she approached it, taking a moment to let her hands hover above the keys. There was a subtle tension in the air, an unspoken anticipation that made her pulse quicken. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves, but also a steady determination. She knew the power of music, and she was ready to let it guide her once more. The first notes she played were soft and tentative, as if testing the waters, but soon the melody gained strength and confidence. The room fell into an attentive silence, the sounds of conversation fading away as the music filled every corner. She played with emotion, letting every feeling flow through her hands. The notes told a story of struggle, hope, and quiet determination, and the audience seemed to feel it deeply. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others watched with awe, unable to look away. She had played for many guests now. Each performance brought its own set of challenges. Sometimes the audience was skeptical. Other times they were genuinely curious. She had learned to read the room, to adjust her tempo and style to match the mood, and to let her emotions shine through the music. She realized that performing was not just about playing the right notes. It was about connecting with people, making them feel something they could not put into words. Midway through her performance, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was the talent scout who had first approached her at the mansion. He stood quietly, watching her with an expression that mixed admiration and pride. She felt a surge of confidence, knowing that someone who truly understood music appreciated her gift. His presence was a silent encouragement, reminding her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As she continued to play, her mind drifted briefly to her past. She remembered the long nights of practice, the moments when she had doubted herself, and the sacrifices she had made to support her family. Those memories fueled her performance, adding depth and emotion to each note. She realized that everything she had endured had prepared her for this moment, shaping her into the musician she had become. Music was no longer just an escape. It was a reflection of her journey, a testament to her resilience. The applause that followed her performance was overwhelming. Guests approached her, praising her skill, asking questions, and expressing amazement at her talent. She smiled politely, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Each compliment was a reminder that her hard work had not gone unnoticed, that her perseverance was finally paying off. Yet she remained grounded, knowing that this was just the beginning of a long journey. After the event, she met privately with the talent scout. He spoke to her about potential opportunities, including performances at larger venues and collaborations with other musicians. He emphasized the importance of honing her skills, practicing regularly, and remaining true to her unique style. She listened intently, absorbing every word, feeling both excitement and a sense of responsibility. This was no longer just a hobby. It was becoming a career, and she knew she had to approach it with dedication and discipline. In the weeks that followed, she balanced her work at the restaurant with her growing musical engagements. Mornings were spent serving customers, afternoons practicing, and evenings performing at events. It was exhausting, yet fulfilling. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that had been missing from her life for years. Each performance was an opportunity to share her story, to touch people through her music, and to prove to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Her family watched her transformation with awe. Her mother often sat quietly, listening to recordings of her performances, tears of pride in her eyes. Her father, who had once worried about her future, now spoke of her talent to anyone who would listen. The support and encouragement from her family became a source of strength, motivating her to continue pursuing her dreams. Despite the challenges she faced, she also began to notice changes in the way others treated her. Colleagues at the restaurant looked at her with newfound respect, and some even expressed admiration for her musical abilities. Guests at the events approached her with curiosity, eager to hear more of her performances. She realized that her talent had not only opened doors for her, but had also shifted the way people perceived her. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller, and someone whose voice deserved to be heard. One evening, after a particularly challenging performance, she reflected on how far she had come. The young woman who had once felt invisible and overlooked was now standing in front of audiences, captivating them with her music. She had faced fear, humiliation, and self-doubt, yet she had persevered. Each note she played was a victory, a testament to her resilience and determination. She realized that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she packed up her things and left the venue, she felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. The applause, the recognition, and the opportunities were all milestones, but the true reward was the music itself. It was a part of her, a reflection of her soul, and a source of joy that could never be taken away. She knew that no matter what happened, she would continue to play to share her gift and to inspire others through her passion. That night, as she returned home, she sat at her small keyboard in the quiet of her room. She played for herself, letting the music flow freely without the pressure of an audience. Each note was a reminder of her journey, the struggles she had overcome, and the dreams she still held. She smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace and anticipation for the future. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. Music had given her a voice, a purpose, and a path forward. She was ready to embrace it fully. She understood now that talent alone was not enough. It required courage, perseverance, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Her experiences at the mansion, the recognition from the talent scout, and the support of her family had shown her that she was capable of achieving her dreams. She was determined to continue her journey, to face challenges head-on, and to let her music guide her every step of the way. With each performance, she grew stronger, more confident, and more connected to her audience. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace opportunities, and to let her passion shine through, even in the face of doubt. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to her dreams, a way to communicate with the world, and a source of endless inspiration. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a young woman determined to change her life through the power of music. The following weeks were a blur of activity and new experiences. She was no longer just the quiet waitress who moved through crowded rooms unnoticed. Her talent had become her passport to a world she had only dreamed of. A world where people listened, where her voice mattered, and where her music could touch hearts. Each day brought invitations to perform at different events, from small private gatherings to more prominent social occasions. She was learning quickly how to navigate this new life, balancing the familiar work of serving tables with the thrilling unpredictability of performance. One evening, she was invited to a particularly prestigious event. The guest list included well-known musicians, art collectors, and people who had a genuine appreciation for talent. She felt both excitement and nerves as she arrived. The grandeur of the mansion and the elegance of the guests making her pulse quicken. She reminded herself that she had faced fear before and turned it into beauty. This would be no different. The room was alive with chatter and laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of anticipation. She moved among the guests, offering drinks and polite conversation, but her eyes kept returning to the piano. It was polished and gleamed under the lights, its black and white keys a familiar friend. She knew that tonight could be a turning point, a chance not just to perform, but to be recognized for the full measure of her talent. The moment arrived when the host announced that it was time for music. The piano had been silent for some time, and the audience seemed ready for an extraordinary performance. She felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, the mix of fear and anticipation. and she approached the piano with steady steps. As she sat down, she glanced briefly at the crowd, noting the attentive faces and the subtle nods of encouragement from those who had seen her play before. Taking a deep breath, she let her fingers find the keys. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, but they quickly gained confidence and strength. Her hands moved with grace, each chord resonating with emotion. She played as if the music were an extension of herself, pouring her experiences, her struggles, her triumphs into every note. The audience was captivated, their chatter fading into silence as they listened. Some closed their eyes, letting the melodies carry them away, while others leaned forward, clearly enthralled by the depth of her expression. In the midst of her performance, she noticed a man standing near the back of the room. He was sharply dressed, with an air of authority and experience, and he watched her with an intensity that made her fingers move even more confidently. She realized he was not just a casual guest. He had a presence that suggested expertise and influence. After the performance, she would learn that he was a renowned music producer, someone whose recognition could change her career forever. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room erupted in applause. The audience was on its feet, cheering, clapping, and expressing genuine admiration. Some guests came forward to shake her hand, to ask questions about her training, her inspirations, and her journey. She smiled politely, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and gratitude. The nervous, hesitant girl, who had once sat quietly at a piano in her living room, had transformed into a performer whose music could command attention and respect. After the applause settled, the music producer approached her. His eyes shone with admiration, and his voice carried both warmth and authority. He asked about her background, her training, and her experiences. She shared her story, explaining how life had forced her to put aside her dreams, how she had worked as a waitress to support her family, and how she had seized the unexpected opportunities that had come her way. He listened intently, nodding with understanding. And then he made an offer that took her breath away. He wanted to collaborate with her, to help her record her music professionally, and to introduce her to a wider audience. He spoke of venues, concerts, and opportunities that could elevate her career beyond anything she had imagined. She felt a mixture of excitement, disbelief, and cautious hope. Could this really be happening? Was her life about to change in ways she had only dreamed of in her quietest moments? Over the next few days, her world shifted rapidly. She met with the producer, discussed her style, and began preparing for recordings. Each session was intense, challenging, and exhilarating. She practiced longer and harder than ever before, refining her technique, experimenting with new pieces, and learning to express herself more fully through music. The producer was patient but demanding, pushing her to reach her highest potential. She realized that this was not just about talent. It was about discipline, perseverance, and the willingness to embrace every opportunity. As her performances and recordings gained attention, she began to receive invitations to perform in other cities. People who had heard about her through social media, word of mouth, and previous events wanted to see her play. She traveled, performed, and experienced the thrill of sharing her music with diverse audiences. Each performance reinforced her confidence, helping her shed the insecurities that had once held her back. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a young woman who had found her voice. Her family watched these changes with awe. Her mother often spoke of the pride and joy she felt, recalling the girl who had once spent hours at a small piano in a modest home. Her father, usually reserved, could not stop expressing his admiration and support. They celebrated her achievements quietly but with deep emotion, knowing that she had overcome obstacles that would have discouraged many others. Their encouragement became a steady source of strength. She navigated this new chapter of her life. Even the people at her restaurant noticed her transformation. Colleagues who had once seen her only as a hardworking server began to treat her with newfound respect. Some were inspired by her story, realizing that talent and perseverance could change the course of life. The guests she served also began to recognize her, not just for her charm and professionalism, but for the remarkable skills she carried within her. One evening, after a demanding but successful performance, She sat alone at her keyboard in her room. She played softly, letting the music flow freely, reflecting on how far she had come. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to her dreams, a companion that had guided her through fear, uncertainty, and hardship. She realized that every challenge she had faced, every moment of doubt and struggle, had prepared her for this moment of recognition and opportunity. She understood now that success was not just about talent. It was about courage, determination, and the willingness to embrace opportunities even when they seemed daunting. Her journey had taught her to face fear, to persevere in the face of adversity, and to let her passion guide her decisions. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities, and to recognize the value of her own voice. The following weeks continued with a blend of performances, practice, and growing recognition. She collaborated with other musicians, experimented with new styles, and explored the depth of her musical expression. Audiences were captivated, critics praised her authenticity, and the music community began to take notice. Each performance reinforced her confidence and reminded her that she had finally found the path she was meant to follow, through it all. She remained grounded, remembering the early days when she had sat alone at a piano, uncertain of her future, dreaming quietly of a life that seemed out of reach. That young girl's determination had not been lost. It had evolved, strengthened by every challenge and opportunity. She now carried that resilience with her, allowing it to inform her music, her choices, and her vision for the future. As the days turned into weeks and months, she began to envision her next steps. She dreamed of recording an album, performing on larger stages, and sharing her music with audiences far beyond her hometown. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with uncertainties and obstacles. But she also knew that she had the strength, talent, and passion to face whatever came her way. Her story had become one of transformation, a testament to the power of perseverance, courage, and talent. From the quiet hours of practice in a modest room to the grandeur of wealthy mansions and prestigious events, she had grown into a musician whose music spoke to the heart. She was no longer just a waitress who had been forced to play at a party. She was an artist, a performer, and a young woman whose journey had inspired others and opened doors to a future she had once only imagined. And as she sat once more at her piano, fingers brushing over the keys, she smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. The music that had carried her through doubt, fear, and uncertainty would continue to guide her, shaping her life, her career, and her dreams. She had discovered the power of her talent, the value of her perseverance, and the joy of sharing her gift with the world. And she was ready to embrace every moment that lay ahead. Months had passed since the night that had changed everything. She had moved from serving tables at a restaurant to performing at grand venues, from small private events to stages where audiences eagerly waited to hear her play. Each day brought new opportunities, new faces, and new challenges. But she embraced them all with the confidence that had been built from years of hidden practice, perseverance, and quiet determination. The invitations kept coming, and she traveled to cities she had only seen in magazines or on television. Each performance was a chance to refine her craft, to explore new styles, and to connect with audiences in a way that went beyond words. She had learned that music had the power to evoke emotions that people often kept buried, to bring together strangers through a shared experience, and to make her voice heard. Even when the world seemed indifferent, she still remembered the nervousness of that first night at the mansion, when she had been forced to play the piano in front of people who had laughed at her. The memory no longer brought fear or embarrassment, but gratitude. That moment had ignited something within her, a spark that she had nurtured and let grow into a flame. Every note she played was a tribute to her courage, a reminder that even in moments of uncertainty and doubt, she had the power to shine. One evening, she was invited to perform at a major concert, an event that would attract music lovers and critics from across the country. She arrived early, walking through the grand hall with a mixture of awe and calm determination. The stage was set with polished instruments, elegant lighting, and a sense of anticipation that made her heart race. This was the culmination of months of hard work, the opportunity to show the world the depth of her talent as she took her place at the piano. She felt the familiar rush of nerves, but it was tempered by confidence. She had faced fear before and transformed it into beauty. She closed her eyes briefly, letting her hands find the keys, and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, each note resonating with emotion and meaning. The audience was captivated, their eyes fixed on her, their hearts moved by the authenticity and depth of her performance. She played a mix of classical pieces, her own compositions, and improvisations that reflected her journey. The melodies told a story of struggle and triumph, of hidden dreams and realized potential. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, some rising to their feet, others visibly moved by the music. She felt a deep connection with every listener. Knowing that her music had the power to touch lives and inspire others, after the performance, she was approached by music producers, critics, and fellow musicians who expressed admiration and interest in collaboration. They praised her skill, her emotional depth, and her unique style. She listened politely, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. She knew that her journey had only just begun, and that each opportunity was a chance to grow and explore new horizons. Her family attended the concert, sitting quietly in the audience, their eyes filled with tears of pride and joy. They had witnessed her transformation from a young woman working long hours as a waitress to a musician, commanding stages and captivating audiences. Their support had been unwavering, a steady source of encouragement and strength. Seeing their pride filled her with gratitude and reinforced her determination to continue pursuing her dreams. As the weeks passed, her life continued to evolve. She recorded her first album, collaborated with renowned musicians, and received invitations to perform at prestigious events. Each step was a testament to her talent, perseverance, and ability to seize opportunities. She had learned that success required more than skill. It required courage, discipline, and the willingness to embrace challenges and uncertainties. Despite her growing fame and recognition, she remained grounded and focused on her music. She continued to practice daily, refining her technique, exploring new compositions, and allowing her emotions to guide her playing. Music had become her voice, her identity, and her source of joy and fulfillment. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of passion, dedication, and resilience that had brought her this far. She also became a source of inspiration for others. Young musicians who had faced obstacles and doubt saw in her story a message of hope and perseverance. She shared her experiences, encouraging others to pursue their passions, to overcome fear, and to believe in their own abilities. She realized that her journey was not only about personal success, but also about empowering others to find their voice and follow their dreams as she traveled from city to city. Performing for diverse audiences, she reflected on how far she had come. The girl who had once played in the quiet of her living room, dreaming of a life she could scarcely imagine, had grown into a woman whose music touched hearts and inspired change. She understood that every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every opportunity she had seized had shaped her into the artist she had become. One evening, after a successful performance, she sat alone at her piano, reflecting on her journey. She played softly, letting the music flow freely, remembering the nights of practice, the sacrifices, and the moments of fear that had led her to this point. Each note was a reminder of her resilience, her talent, and the power of perseverance. She smiled, knowing that her journey was far from over, and that each day offered new opportunities to grow and share her gift with the world. She realized that her life had been transformed not by luck, but by her willingness to face challenges, embrace opportunities, and remain true to herself. Music had given her a voice, a purpose, and a path forward. It had allowed her to overcome obstacles, to connect with others, and to create a life filled with meaning and fulfillment. She understood that the journey was ongoing, and that the pursuit of her passion would continue to shape her future.